Hello friends in the wide and wonderful world of YouTube. It's your favorite apostate, a non-dude too. What I wanted to talk about today is something that is going to shock many of you. Well, maybe some of you, Jehovah's Witnesses in particular, but this is the audience that I'm seeking to reach. It was not too long ago that I considered myself in your ranks in spirit. Not so anymore. And the question that I want to pose is relatively simple. Is the governing body blood guilty? Don't get all, don't get your underwear all in a bundle here. I have reasons for saying what I do. Let's actually take a look at one of the publications which you're going to be familiar with, which would be the Insight book. Under blood guilt, so you can pause this video, and I'm going to be referring to several Watchtower articles, so pause the video, pull up your libraries, you read for yourself, you decide. There's only so much that I can tell you before you have to make a decision. Okay. The Insight book brings out under blood guilt, at times the Hebrew word for blood refers to blood guilt incurred by the shedding of innocent blood and thus rendered blood guilt. Hands that are shedding innocent blood have been one of the most detestable things to Jehovah ever since righteous Abel's blood cried out from the ground. Okay, so we know that blood guilt is a horrible, horrible accusation, particularly towards an organization which you now follow. You may recall that around, the turn of the last millennium, 2000 to 2004, 2004 is specifically when the policy change was made, we began to accept blood fractions as an allowable condition that relied upon our conscience. The article in the Watchtower of 6/15/2000, page 30, paragraph 2, says this: just as blood plasma can be a source of various fractions, the other primary components, red cells, white cells, and platelets, can be processed to isolate smaller parts. For example, white blood cells may be a source of interferons and interleukins used to treat some viral infections and cancers. Remember, blood fractions can be used to treat cancer. Platelets can be processed to extract a wound healing factor, and other medicines are coming along that involve, at least initially, extracts from blood components. Such therapies are not transfusions as of those primary components. They usually involve parts or fractions thereof. Should Christians accept these fractions in medical treatment? We cannot say. The Bible does not give details. So a Christian must make his own conscientious decision before God. It's interesting. Up until this date, you were not allowed to take any blood whatsoever. Under the command for all Christians to abstain from blood, any part of blood, all parts of blood, you were not allowed to decide. I mean, of course, you could make a conscious free will decision, but if you were baptized, that's a disfellowshipable offense. Taking whole blood still is, but blood fractions no longer is. Now, let me read you an article taken from 7/1/1994, page 29, starting in paragraph 2. Extreme disappointment weighed heavily on the heart of 15-year-old Brunella Incondenti. The most important day in her young life was slipping by. Earlier that year, her growing love for Jehovah and the Bible had moved her to dedicate her life to him. In July of 1990, she was to be baptized at the Pure Language District Convention of Jehovah's Witnesses in Montreal, Canada. Instead, Brunella was about to face a test of her faith that would last the rest of her life. 2 days before, she expected to symbolize her dedication by water baptism. Brunella learned that she had leukemia. Doctors at the children's local hospital wanted to begin treatment immediately, so Brunella remained in the hospital. Brunella knew that blood is sacred to Jehovah. Her parents, Edmondo and Nicoletta, had stipulated that no blood transfusions were to be used in their daughter's treatment. It doesn't mention blood fractions, but do you think that any honest doctor would not offer the possibility of a blood fraction if it meant saving the life of a child? Something to think about. I didn't know what leukemia was, so I looked it up. Leukemia, or leukemia in British English, from the Greek leukos, white, and haemia, blood. It's a type of cancer. or bone marrow characterized by an abnormal increase of white blood cells? So leukemia is cancer. Do you see where I'm going with this? In paragraph 9 of that article on 7/194, Brunella remained steadfast and set spiritual goals for herself. When first learning about the leukemia, she was told she might live only 6 months. Now, almost a year and a half later, Brunella was still making plans for the future. She wasted no time in working towards her goals, remarked a congregation elder. Brunella's faith in God promised paradise sustained her through her ordeal. She grew to Christian maturity though in young years. Her conduct and attitude inspired the congregation and won the hearts of those who knew her, including the hospital staff. Do you know where this is going at this point, Jehovah's Witnesses? Think you do. Brunella died on July 27th, 1992. I'm going to close out with what the Insight on the Scriptures has to say. A man had to provide safeguards to prevent his bull from goring people. Cities of refuge were set up to protect the accidental manslaughter from the avenger of blood. If Ezekiel failed in his duty as a watchman to Israel, the blood of the inhabitants would be upon him. Watchman, watchtower. So Ezekiel could be compared in a similar duty to the governing body who sit atop their ivory tower, the watchtower, and look down upon you, supposedly shepherding you from the outside dangers of the world, right? Truly, such blood-guilty ones are not worthy of living half their lives, as David said. In the psalm, it brings out, "But you yourself, O God, will bring them down to the lowest pit. As for blood-guilty and deceitful men, they will not live out half their days. But as for me, I shall trust in you." And if that wasn't evidence enough, let me close out with, again, what the Insight on the Scripture says. The Christian Greek Scriptures outline 3 distinct ways in which a Christian could become blood-guilty before God. The number 1 way, by bloodshed, murder. This would include those actively or tacitly supporting the activities of a blood-guilty organization or other organizations that have shed much innocent blood. Now, because of the Watchtower's incorrect policy that any and all blood was to be shunned, particularly the any is where the emphasis lies, which would include blood fractions, think about how many children or how many others have died that may be alive today if their consciences allowed blood transfusions. I don't disagree that the blood stipulates that we must abstain from blood. However, if you can, in your own conscience, accept blood fractions, and the Watchtower had initially said no, then does that not make the Watchtower blood guilty as they failed in their watchman duties? This is something that I can't answer for you. You can only answer for yourself. But it's something to think about, especially if you come to the same conclusion that I did, that the Watchtower is is blood guilty by the definitions of their own literature and of the Bible, because they failed in their watchman duties. So remember, bloodshed would include those actively or tacitly supporting the activities of a blood guilty organization. Do you want to support such an organization? Remember, life is a state of mind.